I'm good. It's nice to see you.
It's always nice to, hey, thanks for waiting on me.
Oh, of course. No worries at all. I like the backdrop. Is that the Brooklyn Bridge?
No, what's funny is you must have been doing some research. So the designer, Roebling, who designed the Brooklyn Bridge, he actually designed our suspension bridge between Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky first.
Oh, interesting. That's why they look alike.
Yep. So if you come here and look at it, you would probably say, where am I? So I think like the Brooklyn Bridge, I think is like 2 or 3 times the size, but ours spans the Ohio River. So
that's fun fact. Learn something new every day.
So that's funny.
Yeah.
So what looks similar? Is it the cabling or what?
The cabling. That's what it is. I see the city behind is different, but the cabling, it's just a very distinct look.
Our city's a little smaller.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Most
I was
are.
in your big. Yeah, I was in your big city. Dave, when was I there? Month and a half ago.
Yeah.
So you guys let me come and hang out for a few days.
Awesome. Did you have a good time?
Yeah, it was a great time. I came for a conference, and then anytime you can go downtown and spend a little bit of time, there's something vibrant about it.
It is. Our office isn't far from there. Our office is just 2 blocks north of Wall Street, and we're right next to the water, basically. So the water is somewhat on that path, it kind of goes to the Brooklyn Bridge at some point.
What's that accent? Is that a Jersey or Long Island accent? What is that?
It's a New York accent.
Just New York?
New York.
I had to come in. So I had to come in and I had to transfer my flight to Newark. So it's the first time I've flown into Newark. And that was cool, coming up the water, looking at the city the whole way, and then coming home. But I stayed at the Hilton in Midtown, just right below the park.
Oh, that's a good.
So it was awesome.
Then. Right by Bryant Park?
Yeah, and so I walked down and saw a show. Was down around Times Square. Yeah, it was awesome. Hung out.
Oh, good. So you did all the things. Awesome. Next time you're here, you have to let me know, and I'll give you some of the hidden gems to go to.
See, that's the stuff we don't know in the cities. Yes. I had that big European trip over the holidays too, and like southern Spain, and went to Morocco, and man, I tell you what an experience. So if I had all the New York, I had private tours in all those cities. Yeah. And if I would have had the private tour in New York. Yeah, absolutely.
Next time you gotta let us know.
Yeah, 100%. So born and raised. Isn't it funny that you could hear that accent all over the world, and I bet people know.
Probably, yeah. Well, you know, it's so funny. Depending on who you ask, I don't have an accent, or I do have an accent. So it's funny that you caught it, but I also hear your accent. So I think
what accent?
Exactly. So it depends who you ask. If you ask a New Yorker, I don't have an accent. I do have a client that's from Louisville, Kentucky, and apparently when there's 5 New Yorkers in one room, I have the heaviest accent. So
really,
I know.
Is that when your team's on the phone? Like, is that what it is? Like when all of you are together, you have the accent, or no?
I definitely have the accent of everyone on my team, for sure.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah, we're heavy New Yorkers here.
Well, it is what it is, right? So what's your experience about New York? What's it feel like? What's the city mean and feel like to you, like compared to the rest of the world? Like, that's not some big podcast question, but
yeah, that's a good question. So what's New York mean to me? So my whole family has been here since they came through Ellis Island, which, God knows how many years at this point, maybe 100 years. And it just means, for me, it's family. Because there's history here for us, right? There's, my grandfather's family who had a haberdashery downtown Brooklyn, and, the story of building the hats and the craftsmanship and, what they were like when they were here, and they had a small business and they had a grocery store. So it just represents our history. So it coincides for me. So it just always feels like, that feeling when you go home, I have that here. And then also too, as a New Yorker, it doesn't get old living here. Like, there's so much to do, and I feel like a tourist here still. So for me, it's always exciting. There's always something. There's of course different spots that feel a little bit more like home than other spots. And then I go through phases. Some spots are my favorite at other times. Some neighborhoods I'm at more than other times. But there's always something new to do.
Is it weird when you go wherever you grew up? I know you said your family goes back to Brooklyn, but do you live close to where you grew up?
Yes. So we're all here, brothers, sister, mom, dad, cousins, we're all in New York still, but everyone's spread out a little bit more, right? There's, people are still in Brooklyn, they're in Staten Island, they're in Jersey. So they're spread out a little bit for sure. Some are in Long Island, like it really varies.
All the boroughs, you guys have it locked down. So where's the heritage and family? You said Ellis Island. Is it Italian?
Partially. So Italian and Spanish.
Oh, What part of Spain do you know?
It's a small town called Sada. It's in La Coruña, which is more northeast, which is kind of by the border of Portugal.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's I got to drive the countryside and hit a lot of towns like Ronda and Cordoba and like in southern Spain and Andalusia and hit the coast. It was just fantastic. Incredible.
That's must be a great trip.
It was just we had a great time. I have my significant other Jenna as well with one end.
Oh, how funny!
yeah. And she is. A lot of people probably think she's Italian or something, but I think she actually has some Native American or something. We haven't ever done the deep dive, but she's a principal of an elementary school, and I just nonstop crazy in real estate and the things we're doing on the podcast. But it was a neat 13 days. It's the longest vacation. We've been together 15 years, and the longest vacation.
That's a huge thing right there.
I think so, and we're pretty non-traditional too. I mean, I grew up in traditional families and grew up, very religious and all sorts of things. But we're not married. We don't have kids. But been together 15 years. So,
well, that's fantastic. Maybe you have the secret sauce.
Let's not ask that question, right? So Jenna Guarneri. So, yes. Hey, it is awesome to have you on today to talk all things PR.
Yes.
And you have so much credibility. If we look at all of the initials and all of the statements and all of the prerequisites in front and behind your name. But I know one of the probably biggest, most prominent things you've done recently is, I think over your left shoulder there is, you need PR.
Yes.
Yes, we do need PR.
Placed.
And so, selfishly, this is going to be an exciting and fun conversation for me, because anytime I talk to a professional that I know that knows more things than me in a space that I don't even probably execute the right way, it's just awesome to be able to sit and I get to have some free time, and all those listening get to have some free time. But maybe we have to go out and buy the book after this.
That would be great. Yes.
So what do you think? What do you think we need to know about PR? All of us entrepreneurs and business owners, whether we're 15 years into our business or year one, what do you know we don't know that we need to know?
Well, the interesting thing is when I meet entrepreneurs, one of the first things they say is, well, after they hear what I do for a living, and then I'm an entrepreneur and I'm the publicist and I have a book, the first thing they always say is, wow, I need PR, right? That's how the title of the book came out, because everybody says that. But then once I start the conversation a little bit more and I start digging, they actually don't know what PR is. And they think it's something else, but all they know is they need it, right? They're like, I need it because they correlate it with being famous and creating buzz, which they're not wrong about, right? It does do that, right? But they don't know all the details that come along with it. So there's that component of it that's really what the book is for, is meant to educate entrepreneurs or early stage companies, small businesses, or even people who just want to learn about PR, what it is exactly. So, and for me, PR is all about perception, right? It's about how an end consumer perceives your brand and the messages you are telling through each and every channel of communication, right? And it could go so much as social media is an obvious one, right? But there's ones that aren't as obvious, right? So how your customer service speaks to someone, that's a channel of communication. So they need to have the messaging down, and the messaging needs to be consistent across every person who's talking about the brand, every channel. And you want to make sure that they're representing the brand, how you want it to be seen with your customers, right? So all of that is super important. So I look at PR as more of a holistic perspective to make sure that every person that has a touch point with you is getting the right perception about the brand. So
how do we handle that with the crazy world of social media now?
How do we handle it?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're, even personally, as we're growing and we have a real estate company and all the realtors and everything we're doing with the podcast, it's like, man, there's Instagram and Reels and YouTube Shorts and, now Facebook, Gary Vee's on last night and he started talking about, sorry, it's probably a competitor a little bit, but, and he's on talking about, Facebook Reels now. And it's like, man, we're getting mixed messaging, it seems like, from the so-called experts
every
month.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do? Where's this daily interaction with social media fit in with what you feel the proper PR approach?
Right. So there's a lot of noise out there, and that's everywhere you go. That's whether you're on TV, streaming services, online. There's so much information out there. And of course, everyone has their own perspective, and everyone's perspective doesn't mean that it's right for you or that it's wrong for you. You have to digest it in a way that works best for you. So what I tell entrepreneurs and business owners is that not every platform is going to work the best for you. And you might not have time to do all the things. So which platform is worth your time, and where is your audience more concentrated? So that way you can concentrate your efforts at least there versus doing a little bit of everything and not actually making an impact. So if your audience, so I say a lot of times, a lot of the startup companies we work with, they're not on Instagram. Their audience is not on Instagram, right? The B2B brands, they're not really focused on Instagram, but LinkedIn is really big. Twitter could be big, right? And they can be partnered in a strategy together. So those brands, I generally lean towards that direction. And then ones that are more consumer driven, that have more visual of a product, that would be TikTok, Instagram. So I tell people that if you can't do all the things, just focus on where your audience is, and then build out some really fantastic content for that.
That's awesome advice. I think because to your point, all of the distraction and the information that's coming to us daily and weekly, it makes us think like we have to do everything.
Right.
So do you think that's confused? Yeah. And I think maybe what happens is maybe working with somebody that's that's developed such an expertise in your area is you probably keep us focused. Right. I'm sure you have to do it the right way, but it's like, hey, stay on task, because entrepreneurs, as I know, we tend to get distracted at times.
Right.
And we're very optimistic on the things that we can accomplish, and we can get ourselves in trouble. And so I guess that's probably a message that you see across. It's like, put a plan in place from a PR perspective, I'm assuming.
Exactly.
Just go deeper, go broad.
Right. Because you're not going to see instant results right away, right? PR, social media, all of it is a long-term strategy. And that's also a misconception by entrepreneurs or anyone, is that they think you hire someone and you're going to be famous overnight. Or you're going to start social media and if you don't get 1,000 views overnight on that first video, it's a failure. But no, it takes a while to build up that algorithm or build up that momentum in the strategy. So if you're going to start a plan, you have to stick with it for long term. Give it a year and you'll see results, right? It's not something that happens in just 1 week of starting.
So where do you see the connection or even the difference between, if PR is perception, where does brand fit in here?
Together, right? So I look at PR as this umbrella, right? So there's PR affects perception, which is the brand awareness, right? And this brand awareness is this thing that's up in the air that you can't actually quantify, right? You can't put it down on paper because it's a lot of different factors. So you want to create a brand perception that is the brand awareness of a consumer, and you want to shape that, right? So the different messages you put out will help shape that perception and also affects your brand awareness, right? And the brand overall, the brand perception. So how you can do that is depending on, you have to start from the beginning and developing your messaging. You want to make sure it's clear and consistent, and you stick with that. You don't go rogue and go completely different direction. You want to stick and build that out, and everything from that develops from that. So this umbrella that you have with PR, right? I put brand perception in there. I put social media. I put marketing in there, influencers, newsletters, subscriptions, everything I put under there, because I think that messaging, it starts with PR and how you're shaping that perception of end consumer.
And thinking about that, I'm sitting here thinking about mom and pop shops compared to a highly leveraged and funded startup.
Right.
And, you have a high level of expertise. I know that working with Jenna is not cheap. It's not. But where does someone begin to integrate once they select a PR firm they're going to partner with?
Right.
When's the right time? If you could design it perfectly with a business owner, when's the right time?
That's a good question. And you don't even have to hire a PR firm for that. You don't have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to do that. You can implement your own strategies from the beginning. So I tell everyone, timing really, they say timing is of essence. Timing, you have to get down, you have to make it right. You don't have to have that in PR. But before you implement or execute a strategy, you want to implement the strategy first, right? You got to develop the strategy. So you want to know, who are you targeting with this? What is the goal of this? What is the messaging part of this project you're doing? What is the time frame? And then you can build out the when and time frame of all of that and when you want to execute, right? You want to have strategic goals in place before you just execute on something, right? You never just want to run out the gate, right? And just jump out of it and just start doing all the things. You want to think about it and have intention behind it. Because if you have intention, then your end consumer is going to take a moment to appreciate the intention. And the thing is you want to get their attention, because right now, because there's so much out there with social media and their noises, there's so much clutter out there. It's really hard to grab people's attention. Everything is in small sound bites, especially with scrolling through Instagram, right? You're just scrolling. You're not even necessarily stopping to look at the post. So the attention span is really short. You need to get their attention. So you need to make sure whatever you put out is good quality content in order for that to grab the attention of someone, or even an event or a PR stunt. You want to make sure that it's done in the right way, that you're getting the attention of the consumer, because you're not going to be able to get their attention many times. At some point, they may ignore you because they think perhaps they didn't like your initiative, right? They didn't like the messaging you put out. They got the wrong message, right? Yeah. So you want to make sure if you have that interaction with them, that it's the right one.
So what do you see as, because in 2015, you went through, that's what's awesome about this. You made this leap. I don't know as much of the history as you could detail, and we don't have time to do the deep dive, but 2015, you went through this own process yourself.
Yeah.
And through doing a little bit of research, you had an aha moment yourself.
Yeah, I did.
What was it?
I did. So that was when I was looking to do the leap, right? And I didn't know if I was going to stay where I was at another firm or whatever my plan was. And so I was interviewing elsewhere, and I couldn't find a place that felt like home. That because in PR, there's high turnover, and there's also a lot of perhaps working till 9 o'clock at night, right? I didn't want that, because I felt like what I loved about the job was the work I did, and I would always get my stuff done within the adequate amount of time of a work day, right? I didn't need to stay there just because somebody else was sitting there till 9 o'clock at night, but they were fooling around all day, right? So there were certain things I was looking for, and I couldn't find that right fit. So it was really simple, and I wish I had a better story to this, but all it was someone had said to me, why don't you start a PR firm yourself and then create this environment that people enjoy coming to, and then other people can really enjoy working at. And I said, that's genius. Okay, let's do it. And I just did it. And so I started it. And now the company that we've created is really focused on 3 pillars, right? We have the 3 groups of people we work with on any given day: our employees, our media people, and then our clients, right? But we really focus on employees as well, and put a real focus on that, because they're the bulk of what we do. If they're not happy, our clients aren't going to be happy, right? So we put this huge emphasis on employee culture, and we make sure that's a really good environment. That way they can enjoy the work they do and enjoy coming to work every day. And at the same time, the clients will feel that love naturally. It creates this really robust ecosystem. So that's how I started the company. It was really this aha moment of just creating something that I wasn't seeing out there, which is similar to our clients in a way, which is interesting, because our clients are startup driven. They're founders who create a whole new product or service, or they're carving out their own niche, or they're changing an antiquated industry. So I felt like, I think that's probably how I got into the startup space too. It just felt like a natural correlation. And, we're not much different than our startups.
Where's the passion that comes through here in our conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Where's that come from?
Oh, I just love what I do, to be honest. It's funny. I was somewhere recently, and I took a call outside of work hours, and somebody thought I was on the phone with a friend. And I said, because I was smiling so much, and I was like, no, I just love what I do. This is fun to me, right? Like, I get to work with really awesome people, and they're super appreciative of our work, and they're great people to work with, and they become great partners, great friends. So for me, I love that energy I get out of it, and that appreciation from clients, and being a part of the process with them, and getting to see their brand go from, one level to all the way up here, a huge next level. And being a part of that is really rewarding.
What would you say, without having the big chart in front of you? I'm sure you know your business, but what's the average length of time since you started your company in 2015? What's the average length of time we're sitting here 8 years later? It's probably happened in the blink of an eye.
Of how quickly our company went from here to up here?
Yeah. What's that process like? And
But
did it go to plan? Just like everybody's plan works out perfectly, right?
Right. There's some clients that I can say that, they were the home run example of things that everything went perfectly to plan. And those clients, we saw success within, close to a year, under the year. And then depending on what the pitch is, everyone is different. So sometimes depending on what the market is, what the news cycles are like, some will do better than others. So I would say the ideal time that works really well, and that's a home run for us too, would be under the 1 year mark. Some can take longer just because it's a harder news cycle, right? You can't plan certain things, and sometimes the story just doesn't work for what reporters are looking for.
How does someone set a PR budget? How does that look
question.
Like?
Well, it depends on how much they want to invest in PR, right? So what I've noticed is that early stage companies, they don't realize what the ROI is on PR, right? There's a huge return on, but it's long term. They want more things instant, right? They're looking at their spreadsheets, they're looking at numbers and seeing what it is. So they generally, PR, I find, falls more into the creative space, right? They mark it off as this thing that can come later. But I always tell people they should plan for it early on, even if it's a small fraction of what a typical retainer is, right? You might not need all the efforts from the PR firm, but as long as you're getting that momentum, starting that momentum early, it will help you as you grow to get much larger placements, much larger media outlets covering you. So it really depends, but I tell people to really implement that earlier on because it's such a huge part of the process, and growing the brand helps increasing the brand awareness helps growing the brand.
So a few minutes ago, you touched on culture.
Mm-hmm.
It was so important to me, just that word. And so, back 15 years ago, when I started my company, and then really the new iteration of this podcast and what we're building with it, really 6 to 12 months ago. Culture, I think to most people, like, yeah, I like that word.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds good. Yeah, I want a good one. What do you think it means? What's culture for a business? You said that your employers are really number one to you. That goes hand in hand with something that, Richard Branson with his Virgin Brands. I mean, he's really driven that thing really deep.
Yeah.
And, I'm not as good at that because here's what I love my people, and I have gone all in with it, and they feel like family. We have this culture. But I try to convince them all, it's all about the client, guys. It's all about the client. It's all about the sales experience. But I care about them more than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
But what's that like to establish that culture? Is it just let it naturally evolve? Does it need to be intentional? Is it based on values and principles? What's your thought when you built your business around?
I think those last two things you said, it's intentional, it's built around your values, right? So within our values, we really focus on the employee first, because I know the client relations is going to come secondary. So we make sure that we talk about the employees, right? How are they ranking each month, and how are they doing each month in terms of their personal goals, right? What do they want to achieve? How can we help them long-term with their goals, right? Also then intention of creating culture, you have to do things, right? So we know every quarter we're doing a virtual gathering, right? Tomorrow we're doing a paint and sip together that everyone's really excited about, right? And then on top of that too, we do summer retreat, and everybody comes to New York, and we do something really incredible that's just all the hard work is put together, and we make sure that we do a fantastic event for them because they deserve it at the end of the day, right? So we don't make the work related. We make it fun. We just want them to enjoy their time while they're there. So we do that in person. We do a holiday party that's in person, right? So those are the quarters that we really focus. We do 2 quarters in person, 2 virtual rather. And so we make sure to plan that time and carve it out, because if we don't, it will get missed. We won't be able to get to it. And it is a huge thing, right? If I ask employees about it, they say, let's do more stuff together. Let's do more. Let's plan something. Let's watch a movie, and we'll all watch it by Wednesday, and then we'll talk about it on Thursday, right? They actually enjoy that stuff. So I constantly poll them and ask them questions to try to dig a little bit deeper, to say like, hey, during our team meetings, aside from them talking about their personal goals and how they're doing each month, it's okay, what can we do better? How can I provide more value to you, right? That's a simple question that we actually ask about all 3 of our buckets, right? How do we get more value to our clients, right? But also the employees, like, do you need help? Are you overwhelmed? Is there extra support we could provide to you? What does that look like, right? So it's constantly asking, like, how can I help you? And what can we do for you?
Wow. Kudos. Aside from you being a PR guru, kudos running your business on that.
I appreciate that. It took a long time to learn all these little tricks through, you have to say, is through reading a lot of books. And that's when I also realized there wasn't a book for PR for entrepreneurs. So that also inspired me to write the book.
What was that process like? How long did you think about writing the book before you took action?
Okay, so I'm someone that just does. So I didn't have to think about it for too long. One of our employees actually came across Inc. magazine has their own imprint. So when they came across this, they said, Jenna, this would be so great for you because all of our clients want to be featured in Inc. So it's a great connection. So I said, you know what, that's really great. Let's do it, right? I never had the long-term goal of writing a book. I'm not a writer typically by trade, right? I never thought of that. That wasn't a goal when I was little to write a book. So when the person presented, I was like, absolutely, that's a fantastic idea. I love this. Let's do it. And then I just outreached them and we had the conversation. They saw the value in it as well. And then it just happened, right? It was really quick, another quick transaction in that sense. But the process was pretty long, right? Writing a book is not easy by any means. And writing the book itself took about a year, but it was good timing because I actually started at the beginning of quarantine. So I had that extra time. I was home. I had, nothing to do in between of anything. So I was just constantly writing the book each day. And then I broke it down into increments, right? Each day I knew I had to write at least 250 words. So that way it didn't feel like I was getting overwhelmed or it was just too much to handle. So I broke it down in increments that were more manageable for me. And it seemed like it was a smaller task versus this huge task of what it really is. But, I broke it down that way. And then it was a fun process for sure. And then of course you go back and forth with your editor and they're looking at each chapter. We're going through notes, making edits, adding things. But we really, after we go chapter by chapter as we're editing it.
Are you the first person in your family that's written a book?
Yes, I am actually. Yes, I am for sure. It's not a usual thing for people, I don't think.
I mean, in most of, I have a good friend in Dallas. His first book's coming out on April 1st, and he's just giddy about it. He's a social media coach. He's just booming. And so how special did it feel in that moment? Because you were already relevant in your space. I know you were. Without us not knowing each other, you were. And so, yeah, you didn't need to establish any more relevance for yourself to like, hey, you should be an author. But afterwards, what did it feel like when you were done? Did you go to Christmas and holidays and you're different to your family members now and we can't talk to her, she's famous?
No, they make jokes of it, right? We all banter with each other and we just make fun of each other in a lighthearted way. So they make fun of me too with the book and they're like, oh, she's an author, she has a book. But
get in line, can you give us a signed copy?
Right. Exactly. So for them, it's just no different. They know I do this kind of stuff all the time. So they're pretty much used to it at this point. But for me, I had a party, right? What better way to celebrate a book than a huge party? And we did it great. Like I didn't want the traditional party, right? Because it's kind of similar to our PR tactic is you don't want the typical party that people get bored at. And it's like what everybody else does. So I wanted to make a party that people would remember and that we had a connection to. So we actually, one of our clients in New York that we do some work for sometimes is Coyote Ugly of New York City, which obviously there's the movie about as well. And so I was like, I want to have a party there. That would be memorable. Nobody's expecting a book launch party there. Let's do that. So we had a big party there. It was a great time.
Did you make a whole PR event around it?
Oh, of course. Absolutely. We had media coverage there. I mean, we have to at that point. Yeah. And that was also to celebrate too, because we were on Good Morning America for the book as well. So we did our own PR strategy with it. I mean, if we're going to be publicists, we got to be good publicists for ourselves at the same time.
All right. That's good. I found something interesting. When I think people are always looking for linkages between themselves, like, hey, what do we have in common? What do we have? Being a salesperson, listen, we're all salespeople. We're in business.
Right, of course.
Being a salesperson, anytime I meet someone new and it's like, wow, there's a really good prospect for this service that I have. And you're trying to find out like, hey, where's the commonality I can establish? So here's something that I found. I don't know how this links us. Okay. But we have our second iteration of our podcast studio. I'm not in it today. They actually brought me into our media room. So we have the digital screen behind us. But in there, right now, as we're still decorating it, we have a statement on the wall. It's actually sitting on a bench. And it's the man in the arena from Teddy Roosevelt.
No.
Yep.
Where did you come across this? That I love that speech.
You're in PR, so you have to make sure that you do PR. If I'm sitting here talking to somebody who's expert about,
you dug deep on that. That is, I have it memorized, and it's so funny. I haven't thought about that in a little while, and I used to one morning used to recite it every single morning. I think when I first started the business, it was just a speech that spoke to me so much that I was like, at that point, I'm reciting it so much, it became second nature, and I remembered it. So, oh my gosh, that's so good. You know what? I need to. What about that?
Yeah. So why? Because when I read it again last night. I do a little prep work, right? Probably, I don't know, I could probably be more professional and make this my full-time job. But as I read it last night, I'm like, yeah, man, that's why we sat it in there on that bench. There's so many parts of it that before anybody was a self-help expert, before they wrote any book trying to say, hey, it's going to be okay, all the people in the world that telling you can't, like, get up and you can do it. It's like that was before all of it.
Yes. So good. And it also, there's so many critics out there, especially with social media. It's amplified, right? Everyone has something to say. Everyone's trolling something. Everyone wants to knock you down if you're doing good, as they sit at home and not doing anything, right? And so, man, in the arena, it talks about it's not the critic who counts, right? It's the person that it's the person who actually goes into the arena, is actually fighting for a cause. Even if they fail, at least they tried. Right. So I think there's that message that speaks to me a lot, because even if my book didn't do well, if it wasn't a number one, at least I did it. Right. Like, that's all that matters at the end of the day. It's just having those goals and those aspirations that counts. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says. And I think that's too why, it's something bringing this up, because I'm not someone that cares too much about what other people think of me. And I think maybe perhaps that speech kind of shaped that for me, because it's at least I'm trying to make something of myself. At least I'm trying to be the best version of myself, regardless of what everybody else says. Why is that so hard for us? Because what I try to share with so many people that I'm around on a daily basis, it's like, hey, if I could go back to when we were, the majority of us, to when we were really young, if you're fortunate to have just a basic childhood, but go back to that period, everything we did was like, just get up and walk. Just go play with your toys. Just go play with a friend. Just go do something new. Everything about our lives when we were young was, well, just go do it because you want to and you want to have fun. Right. It's the simplicity of it.
Yeah. And then we progress through life and we've forgotten that. It's so fascinating to me. And if we could just get back to the basics of that every day.
Yes.
I think this process of being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, even, the term entrepreneur, I just think about my personal production team and the things that they work on me with. I mean, everybody knows it, but I really couldn't execute and do the majority of the things I do well on a daily basis without the people around me. Right. And before I started my business, I was an employee for years. And so it takes the similar mentality, a similar approach I have found to do something well, to be a successful employee, to be a good support staff, that it does to run a business. And I just think we're clouding it up and we're letting too many people in our headspace, and I hate it.
It's that noise. There's too much clutter in this world, and the basics work so well. And that's why too, like with a lot of our PR strategies, and even the book, I talk about it as well. It's going back to this element of human connection, right? People crave that authenticity that's lacking because they're overwhelmed by too much out there, too many people trying to sell them on something that it's just not connecting to them. And people just want that connection these days because it has more meaning. And I think at some point, and I think even during COVID and quarantine, people started to realize that's what they want, is that human connection versus having all this stuff and all this jazz and all these things that are selling them. At the end of the day, all that matters is that human connection. And I think that's a part of it too, is like, it just feels good and it's simple. Right? There's not so much of that simplicity anymore. Everything's over complex.
Is there something with all the clients that you work with? Does there seem to be a similar problem that you're trying to help them solve? Is there one or two that your team consistently talks about that you're like, here it is again? Here's the same old problem that's creeping up. Here's what we need to, is there? Not to say it's like that, what is that? What's that look like? Because I'm not like, hey, what's the best advice we could give? But what are the one or two similar problems we tend to run into?
It's interesting because our clients are somewhat similar, but I don't know if we've ever had any kind of big problem that was consistent across the board for all of them. I think something that they always need is clear messaging. And there's some of our clients who are in the past even who have made it over complex, overanalyzed, kept changing it, right? And sometimes it's just like, you don't need to overthink that. You don't need to think about that much. It's really simple. Why are we talking about this much? This is what it is. This is the information and it's fantastic. Let's stick with it. And they overanalyze things. And I think there's this concern with it that it's not going to resonate right with people, right? So you start to get in your head a little bit about all these different variables and all this noise out there and how do you compete with it, that you overdo what you're doing to try to match that. But sticking with the basics and sticking with something simple works really well.
Simple. I find me using that word so often every day to try to convince myself of it too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, right? Why make something super intense when it can be just a simple answer?
I think we think it's our job, I guess. So to go back to culture a little bit, when you have one of your business clients scaling, when they're in this moment of they found and established a little bit of success, but it's time to take this to the next level, where do you find them? Where's this culture? Is it easy to carry that on with them? What are you finding? Like, do they lose that a little bit? I heard just how you intentionally engage with all your clients. Like, it's almost an internal PR campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's important. That's something we talk about too, is how do you create this personal connection with your client, knowing that every client and every personality is extremely different from one another, right? So what works well for you may work completely different for somebody else. So it's about learning what their personality is. And what we do here is that we learn about the DISC assessment. So where do we rank on that in terms of our personalities? How do we work with each other to be a good team? But then in doing so, we learn then about our clients, right? Because then we can pinpoint what their personality is, right? And some people may be like into starting a conversation before a meeting and talking about what they did over the weekend. Some people don't want to talk about that. They just want to go right down to business, right? So by learning about personality styles, we learn how we can be better prepared for our clients and what they're looking for in the relationship, right? So we try to really assess each client and to figure out what works best for them, how they communicate, what's their platforms they use. We just want to make it as simple and seamless as possible and get aligned with their values. So that way they enjoy the process because it speaks to them in their own voice.
When you talked about when you wrote your book, one of the important things, I guess probably what educated you on writing a book and what it meant, you said you educated yourself a lot through reading, right? Through books that you've read. I hate the question like, hey, what's your favorite book? But what's the book that has impacted you the most, that helped you become the entrepreneur, the leader, right? The evolution of who Jenna is now. Like, what's that book? If I picked it up tomorrow, you're like, yeah, I really think this would help Mark and anyone else.
Okay, I'm going to give a shout out to one of my clients because I do love their book and it is one of my favorites. So it's by McFall called Grind. So he's the co-CEO of a coffee company, third largest in the U.S., Big B Coffee. And his book talks about, being a startup or a startup early stage founder or a franchise, small business, whatever it is, and going through the motions of it and figuring out your journey and figuring out the business as you go and talking about from his experience, the different obstacles he came across, right? So for me, I love experience shares. So I love when I can hear how things were affected by how entrepreneurs were affected by different scenarios, what they did to cope with it, how did they go around it, right? Because that's how I learn, right? You could tell me a million things, but if you're not telling me how you handled it, it doesn't resonate with me. So I like to know, and so that way I'm best prepared, because when I'm going around my day and I'm seeing things, I can flag it for myself and I say, oh, I read about something similar. I can handle this scenario. So for me, that's a book that resonated with me really well. I love those first person stories.
Yeah, I think they're awesome. I think you can connect with them. It feels like, hey, I can see myself there, right? Exactly. I can go through that experience. And people that write those books from that firsthand experience that they really went through, they lived it. And it comes through the book, that passion, that commitment stuff. It's just awesome. When you said earlier, you're like, hey, you don't have to have a big PR firm, or you don't have to have a big budget in the beginning. Yeah. What's our takeaway going to be from when we read your book? Like, you need PR. Could I read that book if I'm a new business owner?
Yes.
And by the end of it, can I understand a path forward?
Absolutely. It actually gives you details on what to do next, questions to ask yourself, where to start, right? And then also how to craft your messaging, what is the brand awareness, how to understand the concept of it, and then what do you do for yourself with it? So it goes through all the details, especially because it's targeted towards that early stage startup founder, that mom and pop, right? It's meant to be able to be that guide. So that way, at some point when you get to be to that huge company where you can hire the PR firm, then you give it to them to do, but at least then you're aware of all of these details and, how do you be better prepared to work with that firm too?
What's your opinion of, you're in a very busy and competitive space.
Yeah, very competitive, right?
In probably one of the top 5 or 10, you'd say number 1, but I'll say top 5 competitive cities for that competitive space, probably in the world.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe it's London, Paris, Tokyo, New York City, right? How do you navigate that?
How do we compete with the most competitive firms in the most competitive cities? Well, you know what? Kind of similar to a sports team, right? My husband is a high school football coach, and they do this tactic where their team is always one of the best in New York. But how do they make themselves better? Well, you compete against the best teams in other cities. Even if they're way better, at least you're challenging your team to get to the next level. Because if they're the best playing teams that are not as good, of course they're going to win. And it's not a challenge, right? So being in a challenging city with so many amazing agencies, it challenges me to keep pushing ourselves to be better, right? To come up with new ideas, right? So it's constantly chasing something to be better than. So it just helps keep you on your tip of your toes, essentially.
You compete against yourself and your performance or your competitors?
Myself, right? We're our own worst enemies for a reason. Definitely very competitive against myself. I constantly need something to be working on towards a goal. So to me, I just need to be the best version of myself. I mean, there's great firms out there, of course, but I'm never going to be them and they're never going to be me. So the best thing I can do is just to be the best version of what we are and how do we keep getting to the next level.
How far do you look ahead in your business? What are the strategic plans? Like, what's that look like? I don't want to just assume. What's that look like for you?
Yeah, we do look 3 years in advance, 5, I mean, probably max 10 years, I would say. But we do look at that and we look to see, okay, how many employees do we need by next year? How many employees are we looking to project towards, right? To get to this next level of revenue and to get to this next level of the next size of the agency, right? So of course we have projections that take us all the way for the next 10 years, right? Because as an entrepreneur, of course, in my mind, right? I want an empire. I want to have it all. But how do we get there, right? Strategically, right? What does that look like? And how do we break that down? So that way we have our numbers as goals to get to each week, each month, and then every year.
What's your leadership style?
That's a good question. I would say leadership style. I worked in a time where leadership was led by fear. I am the complete opposite of that because I do not think that works anymore at all. And I don't ever want to experience that ever again. So for me, it's the complete opposite. It's leadership by example. And also as more partners, right? There's not so much that I'm your boss, so you need to listen to me. It's more, how can I help you? How can I make you succeed? If you succeed, I succeed, right? So that's it. More understanding and helping each person on an individual level. And there's more understanding that it's incorporated within it. And I don't go by this fear factor of you need to get this by tomorrow. And if you don't, your job's done, right? There's none of that because you also have to be realistic. Sometimes the job just isn't feasible, right? So why put so much stress on someone if you know you couldn't even do that, right? So for me, it's really getting to know the person, understanding them, leading by example, and also teaching them in the process so that way they can be the best versions of themselves. And at the end of the day, there's that robust ecosystem. They're doing that. They feel fulfilled. The clients feel fulfilled, right? Then the agency keeps growing, right? Of course. So everyone just becomes really happy organically.
We're coming to New York tomorrow.
Do it. I'll be your tour guide.
Okay, that's it. We talked about that in the beginning. Hey, when I come, we need that personal tour, right? So with me for the last 18 years of my life being in this real estate space, are they going to sell the $500 million penthouse overlooking the park? Is it going to happen in the, what's it called? The thin skyscraper, the one right next to a couple.
Billionaires Row?
Yeah. Is it like 157 or something? Is that the building?
Is it 57?
Something
Maybe
like
it's 150,
that.
something like that. Yeah.
So $500 million for the penthouse.
There's always someone. There's always someone that they're selling to someone. I don't know that person. Maybe you do. I don't.
I don't think I know him. No, I know that. But that person in Cincinnati would be like a $12 million penthouse buyer.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different market. What's the nicest penthouse that you've ever been in New York City?
Oh, I don't know. I've been in so many spots that to me, I don't know. I can't remember what it was or where it was, but there's
Tell us a special one then. Tell us a special one you've been in.
I mean, they're always crazy. There's always elaborate things, right? There's always more than one floor. There's always a grand staircase. There's always different doors that lead different ways and different balconies. There's always extra things that you just don't expect, right? It's not so much like walking into a studio where you know where the four walls are. This is like you just never feel like the walls end. And there's always more than one floor. So it's always the view. And the view is the biggest thing in New York. Where do you face? So what direction is it, right? Like depending on that changes the price of things. So the view is also something that changes things. So
that sounds like a PR angle.
Yes, exactly. It's a selling point, right? That's their niche, right? It's the selling point is of the location and where it faces too. So that's something that's interesting about New York.
Yeah. So if you can take a building and four sides of a building, and the value changes, you can have the same apartment, but on either side, it's valued differently.
Exactly. Yeah. Depending on which direction it is, right? If there's another building on the other side and your window faces that building, you don't have much of a view. But if you're on the other side of the building that faces the park, well, that's prime spots, right?
What's our takeaway for the brand of our companies?
What do you mean the takeaway?
Well, if we have a building and to us, we could put the same floor plan online and we could say, you enter the apartment, it's the same experience, but it's more valuable based upon this other thing.
Yeah.
So it could be, maybe it's the takeaway. I'm like, wow, that's just fascinating on how us human beings, how we view things, how we view value.
Right. The perception.
Yeah. And so I try to teach that consistently all the time. I'm like, hey, we don't want to fake it. We don't want to misuse the perception, right? I want to really connect with what it is.
Right.
But if you're not willing to go out and tell your story, if you're not willing to control that narrative, someone else probably is going to. They're going to take the space. They're going to make their thing feel better than yours.
Right.
How do we make ours the fourth wall that maybe is most valuable? How do we do that with our company?
Well, it's with the messaging, right? It's how you're the messaging you're sending out, how you're shaping that, right? And that's one of the things too that you said that it's, how do we stand out from our competitors, right? So there could be three other companies that are selling the same kind of space, the same kind of view, but for some reason you're phrasing it in a way that just seems so much more luxurious, right? There's so much more that you get with this particular view, right? It's how you're presenting it. So presentation is key, right? So it's being strategic with your words, being strategic with the visuals of it, right? You take a terrible photo with a great view and it's not doing it justice, right? If you get that right photographer to get that right angle where the sun is coming in through that window, that's going to sell a lot quicker than something that's a terrible image, right? So you have to look at all the assets, especially something that sells that's at a high price point. Everything associated with it has to be top-notch quality, right? The photographer you use for it, the assets, any kind of assets you have, any kind of videography you do, the graphics, right? Everything has to be done so pristine to match the level of that apartment or that building.
It sounds like you should have your own real estate show as well, just for that. Okay.
One day, add it to the list.
Okay. So, hey, this new world of Chat GPT.
Yes. We actually did a workshop on that yesterday with our employees. That's so funny.
Okay. Give us a 30 or 60 second or 90 second workshop on Chat GPT and from a PR perspective.
Yeah, you know what? Artificial intelligence is changing the game for every industry, right? So for PR, media relations, writing, right? The creative space, this is the first thing that really stands out that gives accessibility to outside people outside the creative space to actually be creative without actually being creative, right? So if you're not great with words, right, this is the perfect thing for it because it helps you. All you have to do is give it direction and keep digging deeper and asking more questions, and it gives you really creative responses. I think it's better for short lengths of context versus long formatted, right? I don't think say if you have to write a byline article, I don't think it's good for that because you're not getting your personal voice in that, right? ChatGPT doesn't know you personally to be able to input what you're thinking exactly, right? Or your personal touch on that. So for long formatted stuff, I don't think that's where it's for, but I think short formatted, right? If you're putting together a content plan for your social media pages, that's a great thing to assist with you, especially if you're not creative, right? You give it some direction and it helps spit out options for you that you can then pick from, but you have control over it, which is really nice.
Yeah. Do we have to be perfect with PR?
No, perfect is boring. We don't want to be perfect, right? People gravitate to authenticity, and having flaws makes you more authentic. So I tell people too, like even for any new employee we put together social media posts and we say, give us three of the most unique things about you possible. I don't want to hear the cookie cutter things. I want to hear things that are so crazy. You might not even want to share with people because it's so embarrassing, right? You might knit with your grandmother. That's awesome. Like, that's so cool. I want to hear about that, right? So those three things that you might necessarily hide or you might consider flaws, maybe you can recite something backwards and you think it's embarrassing, but no, that's actually a selling point. I actually think those flaws make people more interesting and you gravitate more towards those people.
Mm. When you buy things, whether it's a service or you would buy a new vehicle or you would buy a new home to live in, how do you decide when you make big purchases? How do you decide who you select to work with? How do you decide on the product you're going to purchase? What's that process? You as the human, not the Jenna as the PR expert. What process do you go through? How do you think you make that selection and that buying decision?
Yeah, well, I think like anybody else, you ask for referrals, right? I prefer people that know that who they worked with previously, they have a good reputation, right? And then I go based off of vibe, right? I know that's loosely said, but that's everything too. Like even our employees that we work with or the clients we work with, if I'm getting a negative vibe, that's going to be a difficult relationship, right? At this point, I can really pinpoint it in communications fields. Like I know those signs and those red flags. So I look for the person when I'm speaking with them that I connect with, right? That speaks the same language as me, right? Like we can communicate really well. They understand my wants, my needs. And if they're not, I'm getting that vibe that you're just selling me out right off the first call, you're not getting to know me, then I'm not interested because it's too hard of a relationship and that's not what I'm looking for, right? So for me, I'm looking for those people that are there to get to know me, be part of the process with me and make it simple for me because they're understanding me and what my needs are on a human level.
Do you think that go back to the Jenna that couldn't have articulated that as clearly on the spot?
Yeah.
Do you still think you made the decision the same way?
The decision to start the firm?
No, the decision to buy something. When you talked, you clearly defined and articulated what that looks like. And I'm like, yep, that's how humans do it, right?
Yeah.
I think everyone makes the decision the same way. They just wouldn't speak to it, but I think it's identical.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If I wasn't in PR, I wouldn't be able to articulate that as well. No, definitely not. But I think that's what but sometimes they miss signals, right? Of something that might not be the great fit for them. I think sometimes it's hard for people to pinpoint who that person is that is the best fit for them based off of instinct. Not everyone has the right instinct. So I think it's, sometimes people miss it and sometimes miss the red flags, and that's okay. That's where we learn from our mistakes.
That's it, isn't it?
But
that's why getting older. That's why getting older is okay.
It is. You learn.
Yeah, we do. So, hey, as we wrap this up, I think this conversation's awesome.
Yes.
Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. This has been awesome.
No, thank you very much. And then, so the book still, You Need PR. I think that's probably the place where they can go find everything about you and your public relations company on Instagram.
Yep, absolutely. It's unipr.co is the website. The book is on Amazon. You can follow me on Instagram at Jenna Guarneri or even the company JMG_PR.
All right, give us a final hitting moment as we wrap this up to help us have a successful PR 2023. We only have 9 months left.
9 months. I know the year's going by quickly. Before we know it, it's summertime.
Yeah. Give us a little freebie for the rest of the year.
So I think the thing with PR is not to overcomplicate it, right? Look for the human connections. Look to what who your audience is, and what their needs and wants are. When you create your values based off of who you are, and then who your audience is, right? And then your messaging is based off your values, and then everything from that you build out, right? And then naturally everything is very cohesive. Your audience will gravitate towards you, right? And then keep putting out messages that are communicating what your values are. And then at some point, your audience then will share that with other people, right? They'll be the ones that are the sneezers that are sharing about you and talking about you more. So once you know who you are, you'll be able to share that a lot better.
You've made us smarter today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being you. It's good to be around brilliant people.
I appreciate your time.
Hey, can we get your book? Is it on Audible?
It is. It's online, and you can listen to the audio as well. And then I'll definitely send you copies, of course.
That's awesome. Thank you. Hey, have a great rest of the March. Yeah, and we'll make sure we look and follow you and see if we can drive some people your way. But this is awesome. I'm going to take some things away from our conversation today that's going to help me personally, and my team's going to be hearing all about PR for 2 days. So thanks a lot. Have an awesome rest of your day.